Hey guys, and welcome to a tutorial series for the Animal Behavior Kit. In this video, we'll be taking a look at the animations. We're going to cover the general animation settings. You're going to finally see how the animations are set up, what options do we have. Then we're going to look at some animation blueprint examples to see how everything is actually set up, quite simple. And finally, we'll be looking at some custom events that are animation notifies that fire every time an animation starts and ends, and we're going to see how we can use that to add our own custom code and behavior. So if I go ahead and jump into Unreal, if you've been following sequentially, you'll see that we were looking at the AI director in the last video. So we have here our little platform with the AI director, and we have some birds that are there, etc. We want to actually focus on just the animation part. So what I'll do is I will go ahead and delete the AI director. We're going to do that for both. And we could probably leave these guys here. They're going to be inactive. We don't really care that much about these guys. Let's delete the target locations here, since we're not going to be using those. And again, I want to have the level as clean as possible just so we can focus on the animations. So, all right, with that said, the first thing we want to do is how do animations work in the Animal Behavior Kit, right? You've seen throughout all these videos that clearly the animals have an attack animation, they have a rest animation, right? If you saw the day-night cycle, they have an eating and drinking animation if you've seen the need system, so there's clearly ways of having all of these different animations. And the way it works is actually quite simple. Instead of having a really complicated animation blueprint with a bunch of logic in the state machine, we have animation montages. And these are little animation clips that you can make combining into one or more animation clips. And then you can actually play them at will in Blueprint, right? And that makes things way, way easier because then I can do a lot of things with the code, like play random animations to add some variety, change, for example, the speed of the animation, a host of things that it would be really, really hard to do in an animation blueprint. So if I just click on our little doe here, you'll notice that we talked about the behavior, right, under setup, and we have her be, stay in place, ignore, etc. If I collapse this, we also talked about the general settings, right, the run on proximity, how to change the name. This is way back at the beginning of the series, right, some of the death settings, etc. But we conveniently skipped through the setup animations section here, which is in the middle. And I did that because, again, I wanted to couple that with the upcoming video, which is going to be how to actually set things up from scratch. So if you click here under setup animations, you'll see that we have a bunch of things here. And I'm going to first collapse all of the different categories here, just so we can take a look at what we have. So by default, ABK comes with code to handle idle animations, engage animations, attack, death, hit, eat, drink, and rest animations. All of those animations are set up on an animal basis, right? So they're not in a shared animation blueprint. They're right here. And let's go one by one. So what are the idle animations? The idle animations are going to be basically an animation montage that plays every time the animal is idle. And idle means that the animal is standing still. So if the animal is roaming around in the world, every time it gets to its destination, it waits in its new destination a few seconds. That time will be spent by playing the idle animation. And then the animal moves on to a next location, and then when it gets to that next location, the idle animation will be played. So this is basically the easiest one to understand, right? The animal's idle, what animation are we playing, right? Engage animation is basically an animation that plays once when the animal starts the engagement process, and then goes and does whatever it needs, right? So engage means it can either flee, it can either hide, it can either defend, or it can attack. So if you want the animal to play a specific animation just as it's entering the engage mode, you can add the animation information here. So useful if you want animals to, for example, have an animation that, for example, they look surprised, or they do something. If they're going to attack you, sometimes they have like a little tail, right, where the animal roars before attacking you or something, right? You could add that as an engage animation. So this is a one-time animation just before the animal engages. Attack animations, obviously pretty self-explanatory. This is what plays when when the animal's attacking you. Death animation, pretty self-explanatory as well. When the animal dies, it'll play the death animation. Hit animation is the same. Every time the animal takes damage, it'll play the hit animation. The eat and drink animations are used by the need system, obviously when the animal's eating or drinking. And the rest animations are used with the day-night cycle. And this is every time the animal is at rest. And if you recall from the video, it could be either during the day or at night. So let's go ahead and open one of these categories, right? They're, by the way, they're all going to have the exact same options. So going over one of these is basically going to tell you what you need to do about everything, right? So let's just do the attack animations. That's pretty popular. And when you open this, you're going to see two different things. You're going to see an animation list, which is actually an array of animations, and you're going to see a play mode. So right now, if I hit attack animations and I expand the animation list, you'll see that we have the actual animation montage. In this case called Buck AM attack. And then we have other options like the animation play rate. Remember, this is a percentage. One is 100%. You could have it like at 0.5, right? If you wanted the attack animation to be slower. The animation start section name. Remember, when you're doing animation montages, you can combine several different animation clips into one file, and you can create sections and give them names. So if for whatever reason you wanted the animal to start in a specific section, you can specify it here. Now, why is this useful, right? Well, one, you could create variety. So let's say that you want to use the same animation for different kinds of deer, but maybe you want the doe to be a little slower attacking than the buck. So you could have the buck at 1 or 100%, and you can have the doe at 0.75. So the doe will essentially attack at 75% rate compared to the buck, right? So you could add that type of variation, or maybe you want the young animals to attack only 20%, right? And you would put 0.2. And then the animation start section, you could have one animation montage that has several attack clips, for example, and you could choose to have one animal start in one section and another animal start in another section. So again, I haven't used it personally, but I wanted to give you guys the option because, again, I'm trying to give you as much flexibility as possible. Then you have the sound cue, which is exactly what it means. Every time the animation starts, do you want to play a sound? Right? Very, very common use case. If the animal's attacking, for example, you may want to have a sound attached to it. Or if the animal is fleeing, you may want to have the animal have a sound. Whatever it is, you can add a sound cue here. And then you have controls for the sound cue, like the volume multiplier, the pitch, the sound start time, and you can even add some attenuation and concurrency settings. Again, these are all settings for the sound. So I didn't want to leave this part out because I know, again, giving you guys as many options as possible. And notice that this is an array, right? So we can add as many animation clips as we want. And actually, this is the perfect segue to look at how to use several different animations. So if we go to the Animal Behavior Kit folder, go to Blueprints, go to Characters, Animals, Ground Animals. Let's go ahead and go to the Tutorial folder, and let's drag our bear, BP Bear Tutorial. If you recall, we used this guy previously in another video. And we go to the animations. Again, we're going to do the same thing. I'm just collapsing the categories here. And we again go to the attack animations. You can see that we actually have 3 different animation clips, right? So we have, and I'm going to collapse the animations here, right? So it's an array. You can add as many animations as you want. And the first animation clip, you can see when I expand, the animation montage is called Bear AM Attack 1, and you can kind of see a little icon here. The second one, you can see that there's a different icon and it's a different animation montage. And obviously the third one would be the same. So how does it work when you have more than one animation, right? How does ABK pick which animation to play, and how does the general system work? And that's when the play mode comes into play, right? If you click here on the little drop down, you'll see that we have three different settings. We have single, we have random, and sequential. And if you have several animations here and you pick the play mode to be single, you can see I'm going to hover my mouse. It's only going to play the first animation in the array. So if I have play mode be single, only the animation in index 0 will play constantly, this animation. So, okay, great. So this is a way for you, even if you have several animations, to only play one, and that's only going to be the root animation here. Random means that every time the animal attacks, and that's the default, by the way, random, it'll pick a random animation from the array and it'll play that. And sequential means that the animations will play in a sequential manner. Obviously, it'll play the first one, then the second one, then the third one. So if let's just, as an example, let's click on single, right? And let's look at this animation here. You can click on the little icon here to browse to that content. And if you open the animation montage here, you'll see how it looks like, right? It's just a simple animation, and the bear's literally swiping with the right paw, I guess. It's just that animation, right? So if let's just test that out, right? So let's go to behavior. Let's make sure that this guy stays in place, but I want him to attack, and I only want him to attack me, the player. So we're gonna remove the tag ABK prey, so it basically ignores these guys here, right? So with that said, remember our animation mode is on single. I'm going to click play, and the guy comes, and notice it's using the exact same animation, right? It's using the right hand to damage me, right? It goes idle, that's the idle animation, then attacks me again, and it's using the exact same animation over and over and over again. And really quickly, let's go ahead and disable, so I'm gonna do this. You don't have to do this, but I was doing some initial testing earlier, and I had the capsule component visible. So I'm gonna disable that just to keep things under control here. And now, if I hit play, you'll see that it looks normal, right? So the bear is just using the one animation. Great. Now let's change this to random animation. That's the default. And we click play, and now we'll see that the animation is doing left hand or left paw, then it's doing right paw, and then the next one is going to do the right paw again. Remember, it's literally random, right? And again, the right paw. I'm going to make myself invincible, that way we don't get killed here. Then left paw. I'm waiting for him to do the double, and that's the third clip. And obviously, random is random, so it's just not picking it. So we'll give it like a couple more seconds here. But you get the point, right? There it is. That's the third one right there with both the left and the right. But basically, that's the idea. So if you have several different attack animations, this is excellent because then you can have a random, you can have an animal do a random attack animation. That gives it a lot of flexibility, and also makes it a little bit more realistic because it's not doing the exact same attack over and over and over again. The third one is sequential, right? Sequential basically means exactly that. So if I hit play, it'll do the first one in the area, which is right hand, and then the second one is the left hand, and the third one is the double hand, and then it's going to go back to the right hand, and then the left, and then the double. So again, one more example. If you want the animal to do like a combo attack, right? Some games may have that, like 2 light attacks and then a massive attack, something like that. Then you could do that, and through the animation notifies, which you're gonna look a little bit later, you could even change the damage amount through code. So you could detect which animation is being played and say, you know what, if the third animation is being played, which is a sequence like a combo, I want the damage amount to increase. That could be a potential use case for the animation notifies, right? So again, a lot of flexibility here. what happens if you don't have any animations, right? So for example, this bear, if I look at the rest animations, well, this is not a good example. Let's look at the engage animations, for example. This means that every time the bear engages, it'll play this animation. If I expand here, uh, notice that I have an entry in the animation list, but there is no animation montage here. I just don't have it. And that's going to be the case with a lot of these animations, right? If you look at some of the marketplace asset packs from animals, I have actually a few, including what you see here. I'm sure you probably saw it at the beginning of the video. The animal variety pack. This is actually a free animal pack that was just recently released in the Epic Store. I'm going to be using this later in another video. If you look at some of these packs, for example, and I look at, for example, the pig, and I look at the animations, you'll see that a lot of these animals come with many different animations, like attack, chew, which would be like eating, right? Death animation, hit animation, rest, run, several rest animations, for example. Um, you know, but we don't see a for example, I don't know, a drinking animation or an eating animation that are separate. We're going to use the same animation. Or we don't have an animation here that we would like to use for the engage, for example. No problem, right? The whole point is the system is smart enough to know that if there's no animation clip, it just doesn't play anything, doesn't do anything, right? Um, Simple as that. If you don't have an animation clip here, it'll just ignore it. Nothing will happen. The event will still go through, right? It'll just ignore it. So very, very versatile this way. And obviously, like you saw on the day-night cycle video, I try to add my own animations for things like rest and drink and eat. Uh, but these were done by myself in Blender. These are not good animations by any means. They're just placeholders so you guys can see how things are set up. So if you're an artist and you can make really, really nice animations, here are all of the categories that you can add to ABK easily. If you buy packets from or assets from the marketplace, a lot of these are going to be included, right? Definitely attack and death and hit are like the most, the default ones. Eat and drink, some of the asset packs don't have it. So in that case, the animal will just stand next to the food and not have an animation. But again, it doesn't really matter. Add as many as you want here, but if you don't have them, no worries. That part of the animation process is just not going to play. Okay? All right, so let's go back to our PowerPoint just to keep ourselves honest. So we looked at the animation settings. Let's look at some animation blueprints as examples here. So obviously a lot of animations are here as animation montages, but what does the animation blueprint actually look like? So if we go to the bear here, and this is our little bear example for the tutorial, and we click on the mesh, you'll see that we have an actual skeletal mesh, and that's the actual bear. And we have an animation section here. It says animation mode and animation class. And you can see the class right here, BP AnimBear_C. And you can click on this little icon here to browse to the actual blueprint in the content browser. And if I open this guy, you'll see that the animation blueprint is actually quite simple. This is not a tutorial about how to set up animation blueprints or what these tabs mean. So I would recommend if you have no clue what the heck this is, I would recommend that you search online. Epic Games has quite a few tutorials on animation blueprints, and they explain the difference between the event graph and the anim graph and how to create these things. This is just to show you how simple it is, right? On the event graph, all we need is a variable for speed and two variables. One, whether the animal is dead, right? And whether the animal is attacking currently. And these are common variables found for the ground animal. These are state variables. You don't have to worry about setting these variables. These are set automatically by the system. All you have to do is reference them here. And then you have an animation notify here called melee damage. And this is set up in the attack animation, and we'll see how to do that later in another video. And when this animation notify is fired, you will simply call a function called do melee damage in the animal class, in the animal base class. That's it. You're setting 3 variables, and you're calling a function every time an animation notify plays. And if I go to the animation graph, you'll see that the default behavior, if I open here, is literally just 2 things. I have a 2D blend space, which is the idle to walk, and I have a dead set. So if I open the BS idle walk, you'll see that this is just a blend space with a speed variable, and this speed variable is going to determine whether the animal is idle, walking, or running. And then here under, whoops, and if I go back here, the dead is literally nothing. I actually don't have anything here because I'm taking care of the dead animation through the animation montage. So actually, you could even probably delete this right here and just have this. The idle walk animation is all you need to do, right? So the animation blueprint only takes care of the walking and running. That's it. Everything else, every other animation can be taken care of through this section right here. That means that for you guys to set up new animals and new animations and change animations and experiment is very, very, very easy. Because your animation blueprint is this simple. It's just a 2D blend space, or you could do a regular blend space if you have more, to make it a little bit nicer. But you don't have to, right? All right. And finally, if I'm going back to the PowerPoint here, let's look at the animation notifies. And this is a little different. And so animation notifies in Unreal Engine are a very specific thing. Inside an animation clip or an animation montage, you can have a section of the animation fire an event, and that's a notify. All right. So if I go here, let's just take a quick look here. Let's just pick the bear attack animation montage. Where is it? Right here. Here. Notice that the animation is playing, right? This guy's just attacking, is playing over and over and over, and there's a section at the bottom called notifies. Let me just stop this guy here. And notice that it's just a little section here, and I have it, and it's called melee damage. And this, this is in this exact position. You can create as many notifies as you want, and this is going to be called every time the animation clip hits this place here. So the bear is slowly getting ready and winding down its attack. And as soon as the attack lands in the animation, in this case, I have it right here. See how the swipe kind of hits? Right there, I call an animation notify called melee damage. And that animation notify is then called in the animation blueprint, remember here in the event graph, called AnimNotify melee damage. And this is then calling a function in the blueprint that actually applies the damage. So this is the way that you set up damage in ABK. Every animation clip for attack is going to have a different timing for the animation when the animation should do damage, and you create the animation notify specifically related to when that animation should be doing damage. And then you would just do this, and automatically, if you just call it this way, you would automatically do damage. So you can add 20 different attack animations, and all you have to do is create the notify when you think the animal should be doing damage in the animation clip, and it will automatically work out of the box because you already have the exact same notify with the name, right? All you would have to have is that name, melee damage. So this is what an animation notify looks like. However, what I mean when I say let's look at the animation notifies, I'm actually talking about a custom event that is called every time one of these animations fires. So I call them AnimNotify because it's going to be a lot easier to look for when you're looking at it through code. So if you go to the BP ground animal base, This is going to be the base class for any ground animal. And you go to the event graph, you'll see that we have a lot of things here, right? We have a section with a lot of custom events, including the play animation events. This is what triggers the actual animations. Perception, this has to do when they notice you, right? Play sound, show tame widget, dead, etc. But we have a little blue section here called overridable events. And these are events that are fired every time something happens, but the events are actually empty, right? So if we go to animation notifies here on the overridable events, and you just open this graph, which is collapsed, you'll see that we just have a bunch of empty nodes. Literally, we have, let's say, attack notifies. We have an event called AnimNotify underscore attack starts, attack ends. Nothing is happening here. In other words, these are just empty hooks that you can use to add your custom code, right? And of course, you can see that we have a bunch for every single animation type: hit, eat, drink, rest. You have these notifies that are firing, these events. And the way you do this is then you can then override these events and do something with them. So if we open our bear right here and we go to the event graph right here, let's just do something fun. What if we wanted to change the scale of our bear every time the bear attacks? It can literally be anything, right? The way you would do this is you come to the bear blueprint, which is a child of the ground animal based blueprint. And you can come here under functions, and here under override, you can see that we have a little drop down. We can click here and we can see a bunch of different events and functions that we have for the ground based class. Now you have to be really careful here. You don't want to override functions that are actually doing something. Otherwise, you are going to break the functionality. So for example, there's a function here, let's say called, I don't know, event check perception. There's something going on here and you don't want to override this function here, because basically what you're telling this blueprint is every time this event fires, ignore what the parent is doing and do whatever I tell you. I'm overriding that function. So be very, very careful and only override whatever items are in this section here. So if you're not sure what the name is, go to animation notifies here, open it and say, okay, I actually want to modify the animation notify attack start. And this is the name, AnimNotify underscore attack start. Go to your blueprint, go to override, and look at all of the AnimNotify events here all together. And we want AnimNotify attack start. And you can see here that you have a new little event that's called event AnimNotify attack start. And let's do the same thing for the attack end, AnimNotify attack end. And these two guys here are the exact same things as these guys here. We're basically overriding these guys with custom code in our child blueprint. So now we can say, what do we want the bear to do when he starts attacking? So let's do something simple. Let's grab and say, let's do set scale. And we can say, you know what? I want you to set the 3D scale, set actor 3D scale, and we'll have, you know, the scale, and we'll do the scale to be, I don't know, 3 by 3 by 3. And then we're going to copy this and say, and when the attack ends, I want you to go back to the regular scale, which will be 1 by 1 by 1. Keep in mind, this is just a silly example to show you guys how to use this. You can add anything you want, right? So basically what we're saying is every time the attack animation starts, I want you to increase the scale by 3. And when the animation ends, go back to 1. So if you click, we go back here and we click play. Look what happens here. Whoa, the bear became huge when it attacked. And then it got really small when the attack animation ended. Obviously, this is just plain silly. You probably wouldn't want to do that, but you can see what I'm talking about here. The code is firing every time the animation starts and ends. Right? You can literally do anything you want. Right? Probably a 2 is a little too much. Maybe a 3 is a little too much. Maybe a 2. Or maybe a 1.5 actually would look maybe a little bit better. Probably a better example because it's not as ridiculous. You can see here. See that? And then it goes smaller, goes idle, goes big, and attacks me, and then goes smaller. Kind of a fun example, but you get the point, right? So all of these events here fire for the individual animations. Make sure that you take advantage of these guys here by adding your own custom code. You can add, for example, a good example that's not as silly. For example, let's say that your animal roars, right? So there is an animation here. When the animal first engages, say the animal detects you and becomes aggressive, you want the animation engage start to roar, to have a roar, right? And then when the animal roars, you're going to attach a sound to that animal using a sound cue. And then you say, okay, well, now I have the animal roaring, make it playing a sound of a roaring sound, but I also want the roar to be so massive that it creates a screen shake effect. And you can actually create a screen shake with a screen shake class. And then you would add the screen shake effect here. You would add your custom code and say, okay, now when the engage animation starts, I want the screen to shake. And that's how you would do it. You see how very simple, something that could be complicated, like, you know, a roar, a sound, something like that, you can easily add it here just by using the animation notifies. I'm going to delete that there. All right. That is pretty much it. I'm going back to the PowerPoint here. That's how you use the animation notifies. So again, to recap, guys, the animation settings, remember that's a list of animation montages. You can add as many animations as you want per category. And you have different modes to play the animations, including random or sequential, right? We looked at the animation blueprint for the bear, which is so simple. It's just one node in the state machine. It's just a blend space to blend between standing still and running. Everything else, or what I call active animations, any action is taken care of by its own section here. And then we looked at the animation notifies, which again are custom events that fire when an animation starts and when an animation ends, and allows you to overwrite them in your child blueprint and add any code you want to add additional functionality. Right? We looked at how to change the scale of the animal, which is kind of silly. But again, a more appropriate example would be to add a screen shake for a roar, or maybe change the appearance of the animal. Right? Maybe you want the animal material to be different. Some games have the animal turn like reddish, for example. You can literally add anything you want. So it's extremely powerful, and make sure that you know about it and use it in your own game. All right, guys, that's it for this video. Thank you so much, and I'll see you in the next video.